What happens to Canadian sovereignty if we skip the F-35s? And why a surprise construction site in Kanata is a warning sign for how we build next. It's Tuesday, January 27th. Ottawa weather, around -11 degrees Celsius, low -13 and high -8. No snow. In Kanata, residents woke up to unexpected development work at the former Kanata Golf and Country Club, and their councillor did too. Cathy Curry says she was blindsided by crews on site, a fresh reminder of the communication breakdowns between the city and developers. People nearby are worried about stormwater management and the loss of open space they believed would be protected. It's a small story with big stakes. If the city and developers aren't aligned on what's allowed, neighbours end up holding the risk. Flooding, traffic, and trust. Zooming out to national defense, the U.S. ambassador is warning that Canada's rethink on buying F-35 fighter jets could force changes to how NORAD operates. If Canada doesn't proceed, the U.S. says it would need to enter Canadian airspace more often to counter threats, potentially acquiring more F-35s itself to cover the gap. We've already seen American jets step in. An F-15 responded to a bomb threat near Calgary, and an F-22 shot down a suspicious balloon over the Yukon. The implication is clear. Without Canada fielding the capability, the binational air defense pact could evolve in ways that mean a larger U.S. footprint over our skies. The policy question for Ottawa is whether sovereignty is better protected by buying the planes ourselves or by relying more on the partnership to do the job. On the economy, Canadian firms are threading the needle of cross-border politics by being indispensable. Voltari Marine Electric, a Canadian company, just won a contract to supply battery-powered patrol boats for the U.S. Navy in San Diego, and expanded south of the border by buying a Florida shipyard for about $37.6 million. In mining, Lithium Americas saw its stock pop after the U.S. Department of Energy took a 5% stake in its Nevada project. Despite years of trade tensions, remember tariffs and tough talk didn't start yesterday, Canadian miners and manufacturers are still landing major U.S. government business while keeping their Canadian identity. The strategy seems simple: make something Washington cannot ignore. But the politics are heating up again. President Trump is threatening 100% tariffs on Canadian goods if Canada strikes a trade deal with China. Timed, Prime Minister Mark Carney suggests, to pressure Ottawa as CUSMA heads into its mandatory review. Trump has called Canada's China ties a sovereignty risk, and even dismissed CUSMA as irrelevant. Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc says Canada isn't pursuing a free trade pact with China and is focused instead on resolving tariff issues. Add to that a Canada-US-Finland icebreaker agreement that's raising questions about Arctic intentions. And you get a volatile backdrop for our auto, energy, and manufacturing sectors. The message to Canadian policymakers and producers: de-risk supply chains, shore up the home market, and be ready for sharp turns in Washington. You can already see a change in how people move their money and themselves. Nexus applications from Canadians dropped sharply after Trump's return to the White House, less than 350,000 in 2025, about half the previous year. That comes after earlier backlogs tied to a Canada-US dispute over how to staff enrollment centers. Border traffic has cooled too, a 30.9% reduction in Canadian vehicles crossing into the U.S. in 2024, and the U.S. Travel Association expects Canadian tourism spending stateside to slip 3.2% this year. Fewer Nexus cards, fewer cars, less cash, call it a quiet decoupling at the border. On climate and clean transportation, Canada has cut tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles from 100% to 6.1%. That could bring as many as 49,000 EVs a year into the country and lower sticker prices for consumers. Even then, it's a small slice of total vehicle sales, so it won't make or break long-term EV growth on its own. The real pressure point is infrastructure. Charging networks and the grid are still playing catch-up, especially in northern communities where long distances and deep cold complicate everything from battery performance to maintenance. Companies like Aurora Renewables are working with those communities to tailor charging and power solutions, and to make sure the transition is practical, not just aspirational. The EV debate isn't only about where cars are built, it's about whether the places we live are ready to fuel them. Ottawa is also moving on affordability and industrial strategy. the federal government is launching an auto task force with Ontario to protect union jobs and plan future investments, especially as U.S. tariffs ripple through Canadian plants and suppliers. And on the household side, the new Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit boosts the GST credit by 25% over 5 years, with a one-time 50% top-up this year. More than 12 million Canadians are expected to benefit. For a family of 4, that could lift annual support by up to $1,890. The aim is to blunt the higher cost of food that's been driven by pandemic aftershocks and supply chain friction, while pushing for more competition and stability in Canada's food system. Back to local infrastructure. Calgary's recent twin ruptures at the Bearspaw waterline ignited a debate that resonates here in Ottawa too. Pay now or pay more later. A proposed $480 million in additional maintenance spending was rejected by Calgary's council, even as deferred upkeep and leaky pipes compounded the risk. In Alberta more broadly, First Nations leaders are flagging a federal-provincial pipeline agreement that says too little about freshwater use and the danger of oil sands tailings ponds. A watchdog warns those ponds could expand significantly and threaten nearby lands by 2070. Whether it's drinking water, stormwater, or industrial wastewater, the country's infrastructure decisions are setting the terms for resilience and for trust with Indigenous communities well into mid-century. Sports, and a big one for Toronto fans. The surging Raptors knocked off the NBR-leading Thunder 103-101. Emmanuel quickly led the way with 23 points and 11 boards. RJ Barrett added 14, and Scotty Barnes posted a 10-10 double-double, plus the game-sealing block on Chet Holmgren. Canadian star Shai Gilgeous-Alexander still put up 24 points, his 117th straight game with at least 20, but Toronto held him to 9 in the first half and kept Oklahoma City under pressure. The Thunder were shorthanded without Jalen Williams, Isaiah Hartenstein, and Ajay Mitchell, and have now dropped 2 straight, only their 4th home loss of the season. On the ice, the league's weekly hot and cold list had something for everyone. Montreal's Cole Caulfield popped a hat-trick, but the Habs still lost, a reminder that spectacular nights can be overshadowed by the final score. The Maple Leafs, Wild, and Penguins each had players singled out on both sides of the ledger, some streaking, some slumping. For Toronto, it's a familiar refrain. When the top 6 are rolling and the depth chips in, they look dangerous. When the cold spells hit, the inconsistencies show. Before we go, a thought that ties today together. Whether it's fighter jets, EV chargers, or the storm drain behind your house, sovereignty isn't only about treaties and jets. It's about the systems we choose to build, maintain, and trust. Ottawa's Kanata confusion, Calgary's pipes, NORAD's warning, and the EV charging gap are all versions of the same test. Are we planning ahead or letting events plan for us? That's all for today. If you've got eyes on the Kanata site or thoughts on the F-35 debate, send them our way. We'll keep tracking both.